One of the great things about businesses in India is that there are young leaders, not only in startups and digital native companies, but also in traditional businesses. These businesses have been around for very long. They have been the foundation of India's economy over the years and over the decades, and they have contributed hugely to the growth of our country. The young leaders in these businesses, they include both family business science, young professional CEOs. Both are equally capable. They bring a lot of energy into their work and some great out of the box ideas for their industries. And cumulatively, their efforts make for driving a huge growth for the economic growth of our country as a whole. So today we'll have a chat with a group of such young leaders, and it's my privilege to have a chat with them. Let's see what they are doing and how they are planning to change the future of this country. So we have with us today Viren Shetty, the Executive Director and Group COO at Narayana Health. We have Shailesh Agarwal, Vice President, Strategy and Business Development, IBM India and South Asia. We have Nirvan Birla, is the Director at Yash Birla Group. And last but not the least, we have Abhijit Roy, the MD and CEO at Berger Paints. So, Viren, I'll start with you. Like we were discussing, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed a lot of business practices and business priorities. And for a healthcare company like yours, it would surely have led to a lot of changes in how you operate and how you think about delivering care. So, could you tell us a little bit about what are the core lessons that you've learned over the last 9 to 12 months and how that is going to impact your future strategy?
I think the most important lesson we've learned from this pandemic is that we'd always known it, but I think it's reinforced the fact that the world is a vastly more uncertain and volatile place than we thought it was. Whereas previously we would only worry about certain government price action or here and there some changes in the tax code. The reality is it's quite possible tomorrow that your entire business could get shut down for no fault of yours, whether it is through a nationwide lockdown or through people just being afraid to leave their house and come to you for accessing your services and treatment. And so that really required us to do a lot of soul searching and think very hard about the value that we offer in society and the way in which we have a preconceived notion of how it must be delivered. The notion that hospitals tend to be hospital-centric. We are hammers. To us, every problem looks like a nail. And so whatever it is, I have a cough, come to the hospital. I need to talk to a doctor, come to the hospital. I need surgery, come to the hospital. I need a follow-up, come to the hospital. Most of these are not necessarily hospital-centric. And while we tried for many years, we were one of the first groups in India to roll out a nationwide telemedicine program. But it was not taken seriously by the patients, but more importantly, was not taken seriously by the doctors either. Because one, people were not willing to pay. It was considered as a very inferior mode of communicating. But now when there's lockdown and there's so much fear, speaking on video and with the remote distance is the superior alternative. It means you don't have to leave your house. You don't have to fight for parking. You don't need to expose yourself to other patients. You can be in and out much faster rather than dealing with the front office, getting registration done, working out payments. A lot of this can be extrapolated into the digital realm. So the biggest lesson for us is the things that we take for granted, the sacred parts of our business, which is hospital-centric, is not true. And that requires us to completely demolish any assumption we have that we are that special and that the services we offer can only be offered in a very large monolithic environment. And so that it requires us to make a lot more investments, not just in digitization, but in changing our entire operations and process flow to be more customer facing, to be more patient friendly, and to operate in this very decentralized manner. So it is not easy. These things are a lot easier to say than to do. It does require a lot of behavioral change. It requires a lot of back-end work from our side. But this is a strong belief we have that the world is not going back to the way it was. And once you have that core belief that COVID and these kinds of disruptions are a part of your life, you will yourself think very hard about what parts of your business are necessary. Or even offices, are they necessary? Or hospitals, are they necessary? And then we can focus on things that make us as more relevant for this very volatile future.
Abhijit, perhaps we could take a question from you on, just try and get an understanding on the lessons that you've learned from COVID-19 and how this has changed your business priorities and your strategy at least in the medium term over the next 9 to 12 months?
Few lessons which we learned, one, of course, first one was it's going to be very volatile in terms of demand. So volatility is one, which is going to affect us, and we need to be therefore very agile in our reaction, and we need to reduce our reaction time considerably. We started the year with a minus 48%, and in the third quarter we grew at plus 30%. We were scampering for the volumes and trying to produce it and send it and dispatch it to various dealers and distributors. So it's always a question of reacting very fast to the changing situation. That's one learning which was there. The second, of course, was digitization. We used to take it lightly, in the sense that yes, okay, webinar, and today it's become de rigueur, almost like everyone is into it and so strongly into it. Work from home has become a norm, sort of, and also therefore there are a lot of changes in the consumer pattern and demand in that. So that's something which we can see happening already, and then we have to react accordingly, to the changing consumer demand as well. So we came out with this, what we call as iPaint, which is a DIY type of a concept. Coupled with that, we went into e-commerce of our own. So every pattern, which was being followed very closely by us in terms of how the changes are happening. In fact, the safety and hygiene became very important in this period of time. So safety hygiene requirements were on the top of the agenda for most consumers. So we also introduced one product and once modified one of our services to take care of this requirement. So in terms of product, we introduced, Silk Breathe Easy, which is an antibacterial, antivirus, anti-pollution product. And in the service which we used to have called express painting, we modified that to make it safe express painting with lots of changes in the app which was developed in that 1 month when we were actually locked down. We worked with the IT team and created an app so that the consumers can see actually what the temperature of the painters were which were coming to their house, whether they are safe or not, in terms of allowing these painters to come in. Who are these painters? How do they look like? What's their picture? Is it tallying with what we have been saying? Because normally the practice in the market is you pick up painters, laborers from the market. So there will be core group of painters and there will be a few laborers whom you pick up from the market. Now in this COVID times, people were very apprehensive about this change in the type of people who are coming into their house and whether the disease can spread in that. So we ensured that this was taken care of, that we had actually pre-approved set of painters and laborers who will be working, and the safety was taken care therefore. The second thing which we did was, after the job was done by the painters, they cleaned up everything with floor cleaner and sanitizing the entire space, so that people don't feel that that if I touch certain surfaces, what will happen to me. So therefore, these were changes which we brought about on the service side, on the product side, in terms of digitization. So these were the major, I think, changes which happened and the major learnings, I would say, from this episode. Of course, we also looked at all the cost elements there. It became necessary, given the situation that sales had dropped and there was a squeeze in terms of revenue. And naturally, we have a fixed cost, so we have to try and reduce as much as possible that part. So we all cost elements were looked at very seriously, and that was something which made us, I think, more efficient thereby. We
Right.
probably wouldn't have paid so much of attention otherwise, but given a situation which came up in our hand, and the time that we had to look at all these elements, we did take a serious look and we managed to bring down the cost also.
So Nirvan, Birla Group traditionally has been a big player in education, not just from a business perspective, but mostly from a social perspective. So tell us a little bit about how COVID has impacted your work and what is the scenario now?
Once COVID hit, it was kind of like a countrywide shutdown, especially for the schools, because all the governments, they were completely strict with the rules as per the schools, and the parents also were completely supportive of that because the safety of their kids mattered the most. So the schools all are, so we have today over 130 schools all over India in over 18 states, and they're all under the name Birla Open Minds.
Mhm.
So they're generally CBSE schools, but some are IGCSE also. Most of them are franchises and some of them are owned. But no matter what the board or the structure, they all had to shut down, right? So that was a big problem for us because obviously we have so many people on our payrolls and we had all our fixed costs which had to still be maintained, because you can't stop that. So we had to run all our fixed costs. We had to pay all our teachers, all our principals, all our developers, the marketing guys, of course. All of them still had to function. The company still had to function, but the students stopped coming to school, and therefore they didn't pay fees until very recently. So there was a big problem. There was a struggle because to run a school, obviously, besides the main motto of providing learning and of nurturing young minds, you also need to financially be stable enough to run it. And when the fees stopped, the online learning had to continue, right? Because that was the support we provided for, because for us, education is the most important above all. So we started online classes as most people did, and we provided them online classes and lectures. We created proper academic timetables for them, where the teachers and which were monitored by the academic coordinators and the principals. And so the teachers went on teaching them as per their daily timetable and schedules. Even the assessments, exams, all of them were conducted, and the parents were given the progress reports and the feedback. But financially, it was a tough time because neither were the parents willing to pay the fees, and neither did the government provide any support on that
Mhm.
because there was no clarity from their end. And in fact, there still isn't any clarity from their end. Only like few state governments like Rajasthan and Telangana have said now, have given a little clarity on the fees payment matter. But otherwise, most other states have not given any decision. And although some of the schools, the parents are cooperating because there's a very good relation with the parents and the academic staff and the management. Most of the schools in like the tier two or some of the outskirts, like rural areas, because we have schools not just in metros, like also in tier two and tier threes. So the parents over there are still trying to, you know, get out of the fees payment or delay it or avoid it altogether. So yes, we did face a lot of challenges and problems, but like they say, something that I believe because I identify with spirituality is that with every challenge is thrown your way for a reason, and there's a silver lining, something that you get out of that challenge, which becomes an opportunity. So coincidentally, Alokesh, we planned 2 years in advance to basically launch our online learning platform, like an edtech platform called Birla Brainiacs, and this was planned like 2 years before the pandemic, with obviously no idea in mind what was going to happen. But yes, so we planned this 2 years in advance. We recruited teachers, we recruited heads of departments, content heads. We recruited our tech CTOs to run the platforms, and we started developing content because we did a lot of research in the market and we saw that there was a gap between the demand and the supply when it comes to the space of e-learning or tech, because no one was providing a complete solution which could potentially replace the need for tuitions completely, or for like replace the need for tuition and supplement school learning of a child. So we started this platform where you have your live classes from teachers all over India, experts. You have your video content, which is formed in a way that makes it interesting to kids. So it's in the form of these things called flip tales. It's a concept that we made where it uses what kids are interested in these days, like cricket, action heroes, cinema, sports, comics. It uses all these cartoons. It uses all these topics. It creates characters from them, and it explains traditional CBSE, IGCSE concepts to kids in the form of fun chapters. So that's the video content of it. Then you have your, obviously you use your AI and you use your data analytics to give the kids assessments, MCQs based on past exam patterns. You assess their strengths and their weaknesses, and then based on these strengths and weaknesses and the way they learn, they are placed in groups of 9 with peers who have similar strengths and weaknesses to them, and that's where the live classes come in. So basically the idea was to make it a comprehensive learning platform. So this we had planned 2 years in advance that we were always going to launch it in 2020, and COVID happened end of March 2020, and we were ready to launch then. Financial year 2020 we were going to launch. So April we launched and we got a huge surge. Today we have around 150,000 users with, and those are not just downloads, because we have over 10,000 daily users also, averaging over 1 to 2 hours on the platform every day. So that worked out for the better. We experienced a good surge. And it was something where we were actually contributing to the pandemic. We were helping out parents and kids who couldn't send their kids to school, learn and grow and keep up with their studies. So all in all, yes, you win some, you lose some. So it was a double-sided story for us.
Looking at IBM, it's quite a different kind of business, right? You're also more than 100 years old. So 100 years young, if I were to say it. What are the changes that has happened in your business, and how are you, harnessing technology for your own business growth?
We are 110 years old, right? But if you just look at the company which was 110 years ago, and now obviously there's no similarity except for the value system, except for the customer focus. There's no similarity. But I won't go 110 years back. Even when I joined IBM, and that's been like pretty much 25 years, we were almost 95% hardware business. Today, hardware business is just around 5%. So we have changed. We've been changing almost constantly. And I recall that in every decade, we had absolutely different set of competitors with whom we are competing with, and many of them are not around. Many of them have gone into different businesses, but there's a whole different set of competitors that come in every new decade. So you have to constantly keep changing, not just in terms of your product portfolio, your services, in the way that you address the customers, the way the market's changing, you need to align to it. And IBM, we can say that in some of those things, we are not just aligning to the way the market is changing, we are also creating some of those markets, specifically when it's come to technology and use of the technology in the organizations. We ourselves are a large consumer of technology, right? So most of the things that we actually propose to clients are something that we have used ourselves and at scale, right? So it is, many of those things become the case study for the organization to use in their environment. We are across 170 countries, different languages, different cultures and all, and work as same organization. I'll give you a couple of examples. As I said, we are in 170 countries, but tomorrow if you just port me to a different country, say Slovakia, and say now you need to work from there, I can tell you with huge amount of confidence that I can be up and running the next day, because we have the same corporate language across the country. We use only one currency. Okay, we use one terminology for all our businesses. There is one language. So when I go into the management system or a call or talking to people over there, yes, cultures will be different. And yes, how you need to say the same thing will be, but the corporate language, the processes, the way I work is exactly same. I will not know the difference when I go into a different country tomorrow. So that's the process standardization that you've done, because you need that when you want the company to run for several decades or 100 years or so, right? So all our processes are digital right now. When we say digital, yes, you sometimes like to use the word paperless, right? We still have printers and we still print out because people have some comfort with it, but it is not required, right? There is no process internally which actually requires paper. So as Viren was saying, when the pandemic hit, frankly, we had work from home as a strategy and an offering for a long time for different reasons, simply because we do employ people and experts sometimes whose time we want to use in a way that you don't want to waste time in travel. And if they are in different locations or even different countries, you still should be able to use them. So we had work from home for a long time, but we did it at scale. 95% people working from home, or a little more than that, working from home during pandemic. And we did not miss a heartbeat in that process, right? Simply because everything was digital from the day one, and all our customers servicing, except for some of the places where you need to go physically to change a disk or to do any physical servicing, that one definitely get affected because of physical movement. But otherwise, nothing gets impacted simply because all the process are anyway digitalized and made for people to work from anywhere. So yes, it is 110 years. It is the same company, and it is a very different company. And this is not going to end. We change from hardware to services to software, and now software to platform company. Okay, we are talking of data, cloud, and security as the platform, and a whole new set of clients and a whole new set of competitors. The journey will go on, and we need to.
I think one of the keys to success for longevity or perpetuity, as we say in the family business jargon, is that you keep evolving, right? And you evolve with the times. So, which IBM has done very successfully. It used to be just a mainframe company, right? I mean, it's a making a massive company, which you still do. The really large supercomputers, some of them in the top 10 list are still from you. So that's good. But yeah, you changed to services, then to software platforms. This whole journey has been quite exciting. And Viren, you're, the scion of somebody who's quite a pioneer, in our country. And you are also looking at new growth areas. You're looking to evolve the business. So tell us a little bit about what is your, like Shailesh was talking about the growth and the evolution of IBM towards different businesses. How is Narayana Health moving? How are you guiding it? What are you looking at in the future? And what are the challenges that you still face?
Dr. Shetty's vision was to build a company that was the world's largest healthcare provider. Right. And to be the world's largest healthcare provider, he defined it as beds, because a bed was the simplest unit of taking care of patients. And so he studied all the markets, and he found out that the largest healthcare provider at that time was in the US, and they have 30,000 beds. Okay, I said, fine. I also want 30,000 beds. And so he defined that we need to build 30,000 beds as a way to achieving the goal of getting to that many. But the more we spend time in the business, the more we realized, one, it's significantly more expensive to build and manage and operate a bed in India than it is in the United States, because the reimbursement is so much less and our costs are still quite comparable to what they spend over there. And so we had to have a more loose interpretation of when Dr. Shetty says we need to build the largest healthcare network, not necessarily a network defined by the number of beds, but possibly a network defined by the number of people that we take care of.
Right.
And so that opens up the definition a lot more towards us getting into the entire stream of healthcare, or the beds that we have, treating a lot more patients per day. How we do that? By working on our efficiencies. So when a person used to come in the year 2000, they would stay with us 10, 15, sometimes 20 days. Today, by the third day, we're able to get rid of them. Or some procedures, they don't even need to spend the time overnight in the bed. I got one small knee surgery done in a hospital recently. I was able to walk home. But the point is, something that would require overnight stay or even 2 days of rest, you can go and get it done on the same day. And that's essentially a way that we can use efficiencies and processes to treat more patients. But let's extend that analogy even more. So let's look at what is possible when you are connected to every single person on the planet, which means your market is not defined by the people who can drive to you or who've heard about you. Your market is defined by anyone who has a phone or internet connection. And so that means if you're a person in Africa, if you're a person in China, if you're a person even in the US, it does not mean that the services you offer are not of value to them. And so that requires us to think very hard about how we define ourselves. If we are a healthcare company, when the process, we deliver healthcare services, and healthcare services are not defined by something hospital-centric. Now, practically, what does that mean? Practically, what it means is we want to get into fully integrated care. hospitals sell surgeries. And they have been doing from the time they started. You come into a hospital, you are going to get a surgery or some procedure or something, because that's essentially how the incentive structure is aligned. That's essentially how everyone's training is. But if you're selling health, then you're not necessarily targeting people who are sick and most likely the ones to benefit from surgery. If you're selling health, you're going after the healthy. You're going after the pre-sick people, the ones that are just on the verge of that. And if you're selling health, means you have to have a very different mind frame of taking care of them. So fully integrated healthcare system that we want to build means going after people in their home, making sure they take the medicine they're supposed to take, lose the weight they're supposed to lose, do whatever physiotherapy they're required to do, and generally live healthy lives to keep them out of the hospital.
Right.
And that is the biggest challenge, because when you have a business where 80% of our revenue comes from people getting admitted and getting their chest cut open or their knees smashed up, to say that actually you don't need that surgery, you just need the medicine, or you don't need the knee surgery, you just need some physiotherapy. That is a bit of a mindset shift, not from our doctors. Our doctors are actually the ones most on board with this. But essentially, how do you deliver that? Because right now, people are not used to thinking about that I need to take more control of my health. Because of the way modern technology works, everyone does tend to want the quick fix. Just get the surgery and get it over with. Whereas if it's a medical line of treatment, if it is something that's not a quick fix, it requires a lot of monitoring. And for that, we want to be there to hold their hand through that journey and say, it's fine. You're not on your own. We will call you once a day if that's what it requires to ensure that you've taken the medicine. And if not, every week we'll send someone else to draw your blood and ensure that your vitals are in check. And that requires a very different way that we operate. Rather than people coming, we take care of them and then they're gone. So that is the biggest challenge for us.
Tell us a little bit about what challenges still remain, and are there any new challenges that have come up, both for your organization as well as the industry?
First is, of course, is I hope this COVID doesn't again erupt, because that's going to pull us back again, back into that danger zone. I hope that, we get vaccinated fast and, we are safe thereby, at least the vulnerable section of the population, 60 plus, 45 plus with comorbidities, they are at least, vaccinated on a priority, and that is closed very fast. So that there are lesser chances of fatality, which is what is worrying. COVID is fine, but the fatalities are even worse, and that is something which I hope it happens at a faster pace. So that's one worry. The second, of course, rather than the growth, which seems to be coming back to us quite strongly, the commodity prices which are rising is a bit of a worry. So it's putting a squeeze on the profit margin. The margin is therefore getting affected. There is a dilemma in our mind whether to pass on this to consumers or not at this stage. So we will have to take that call, and we are not very certain whether this is going to last in terms of the high commodity prices. Because we don't want to keep changing the prices too often, increasing and then decreasing, because it's quite volatile in terms of the pricing. The oil prices went up day for yesterday, it came down by 8%. So we don't know how it is going to behave. And that is why we are holding back. But in the process, we are getting a little bit squeezed in terms of profitability.
If you are going to go back to school, what is going to be the biggest challenge that you're going to face, and what are you going to do about it?
The biggest challenge, of course, would be following the safety and the proper health and safety protocols. Rather than a challenge, I feel it's more of a precaution, which all schools will have to be extremely strict and stringent about, because even if there's a small lapse in hygiene measures or in safety or in sanitization, all these kinds of measures, parents will not be completely comfortable sending their kids, because it's your kids they are talking about. It's not yourself. Your kids are probably more important than even your own safe and healthy safety and health conditions. So complete and proper measures to be taken with all the required technology. We have schools in areas like Rajaun in Haryana, which are really on the outskirts, which is populated 95% by farmers. Okay, but even with them, we've been talking and we've been going to their houses and having a word with them, and the most important thing when it comes to this is trust. If you have that trust, you have that trust in the brand, in the management, in the teachers, and in the care for the kids. They'll never they'll always have, you'll always have their loyalty and support. So 100% if these measures are taken, the parents and the kids will definitely resume. And secondly, I would also think besides this, another challenge would be now how to balance the child's attention and his learning with online and offline learning, because in the brief span of this pandemic there have been several online learning platforms and solutions and curriculums that have mushroomed.
Shailesh, very interesting thoughts. I think they will be of great interest to you as well. And because whatever Viren is saying, and Nirvana also spoke about, education moving into the digital and the remote kind of mechanism. It's a very good scope for a technology company like yours to actually get these companies to add more value to their offerings. The kind of thoughts that Viren has and Nirvana has, these are the kind of thoughts that somebody like you, an IBM can really help them move to the next level. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about, how technology can help with some of the challenges that are faced by, the traditional businesses, not just in healthcare and education, but in other areas as well.
Sometimes I get confused by the word traditional businesses. To me, they are core businesses, right? And sometimes we compare them with the startup. We call them traditional, but these are core businesses. And yes, there are challenges and coming in from the new companies that are coming in. But look at it this way: if we all agree that data is the new resource, right? Then frankly, all the traditional businesses who have been around for decades should be in a very good position, simply because they have the largest amount of data. And frankly, many of the startups are using the data which is there coming from most of the traditional companies, right? Now, the funny thing about data is this, that it does not matter who possesses it. What matters is who processes it, right?
Right.
One of the richest country in terms of minerals, more oil than Saudi Arabia and more gold than South Africa, is Venezuela, which is on the verge of bankruptcy, right? But it has while Singapore, which is a startup or equivalent of a startup, okay, is processing all the oil and doing well. So
Very, very good examples.
So having a data platform, right, as a basis to be able to get all the data that you have accumulated over the years and be able to apply it, and Viren referred to it when we was talking about it, because then you can put much more personalized, much more customized, and with all the technologies that are available to be applied on data to get both the insight as well as a more specific service experience for your customers, as well as it is possible, but that requires the data platform to be a strategy inside the organization to put the data in the form it can be used, it can be mined, it can be actionable insights can be taken, not in a batch mode, but almost like real time, right? So that is how
More forward looking, right? Rather than just processing what is there behind.
Exactly, actionable, right? It is not analysis, but actionable. And that is like investing and having the thoughts on a data office or a data platform is something that can be a good entry point. Now, there are multiple entry points. The other entry point, and again, with the companies which have been for a long time, Berger Paints, we are talking about 1923, it's been around almost for 100 years. Over the time, the companies have their own internal processes which get crystallized, which get matured, right? But today, you need to completely reimagine your internal processes. See, all the processes were made earlier, there were rules which were made, and the rules get applied to everyone, right? Now, there is always a context. If you have one rule and there is no exception, you don't need actually management, you don't need anything else. But now, with the information technology, you can take the context into account, you can apply the AI, ML, and all those technology and make sure that your workflows, internal workflows are intelligent. It is not one size fits all. I mean, it is not that 5 different patients come to me and I treat them the same way because this is what my rule book is, because rule book can always be finite, right? But something that takes into account the whole context of that patient, how many times it's come, what he has done before, where he has been before, all that information, they apply the intelligence, sometimes human intelligence and sometimes machine intelligence or combination of both, to have a workflow or an experience, to have a workflow which is more intelligent and customized. That can be. The third, okay, and perhaps the most important is the absolute client focus, right? The social media has given a voice to the clients like never before in the last couple of years, right?
Absolutely.
Earlier, we used to treat clients, it is a set of customers, not as individuals. Now, every individual have a voice, and that voice gets heard in different forums. And so having that absolute client focus to make sure that you deliver an experience rather than just a product, okay, for customer experience, that is the that can be the third entry point. But multiple ways to go around using the technologies to completely modernize the approach to the business, and organization are doing it in some form. The other is that need to get accelerated, some faster, some slower. But
Are you happy with what you see happening in India? And since you also had, India as well as Asia Pacific, South Asia, what is your sense? Because you must be meeting a lot of CEOs of companies and of different industries, from steel and cement to healthcare, education. What's your sense in terms of we all say that the pandemic has actually accelerated digital transformation, but has it really, apart from making us talk to each other on Zoom?
see, pandemic definitely has accelerated the digital revolution in some areas faster than in some of the other areas. Some of them are low hanging fruits, ability to work remotely and the changing the ways that we work from home, enablement and all those stuff. Those are the that people have already enabled. Making the fundamental changes in the business to be able to compete. And this has nothing to do with pandemic. This is to do with the way the consumer behavior in the world is moving, pandemic or no pandemic. That is something that the organizations need to embrace. The point that I talked about, whether it's about data, client engagement, or intelligent workflows, is something that need to adopt. In some of the organizations which have been disrupted more, the adoption have been faster. Okay, some of the organizations have been the disruptor themselves. Okay, now what Viren was talking about, like beds as a measure of the size of healthcare, right? And yes, I have read that as a parameter in several places. That may not exist as a parameter anymore, in the same way as number of cars is no more definition of a success of a car rental agency, right? Uber does not have any cars of his own, or Airbnb does not have any hotel rooms, but they are a hotel organization, right? So yes, those as I said, some companies are disrupted, some companies are getting disrupted. To the extent they are getting disrupted, different industries have responded differently. But if you just take the India perspective, I definitely see a huge, we are pretty much technologically curious country, right? So there is a huge amount of thought process going on, new ways of working. Simply, the other part is that we are a very distributed or a fragmented country. It is not that all the business happens in one place. We are distributed. It's a large geography, right? So cost of acquiring the customer has been a challenge for several B2C organizations. So people are looking at very different set of technologies to take care of this problem. You have seen the startup activity in India. I guess it may be second only to maybe US or UK, but you have the startup activity over here, which is among the highest in the world. Again, because the challenges are different, and we have seen corporates adopting these startups and the technologies with much more alacrity than ever before.
Could you tell us a little bit more about, not just leveraging technology as is, but also we are talking about, challenges from startups, from new companies, digital native companies who are out there. They pose, because they come with disruptive models and they are very fast, they're very agile. What sort of steps are you taking to take on the new competitive landscape?
So the best way to protect yourself is in the bandwagon. So we decided that we will take our own initiatives, operate like a startup within the team itself, and see what are the things that we can give to consumers, which probably the startups might bring as a model for themselves. So some of the things, as I mentioned, we went into e-commerce, at this point of time, delivering paint. We even tweak this service that I am talking about. That is also something which the new found. There are lots of players who are youngsters who have teamed up together and have started this type of services. So there are many known names and there are some unknown names as well.
Correct.
So there are these players who are there providing this service to consumers. They may be providing a plethora of services, of which painting might be one. We have specialized on what we know best, and therefore painting services has become the providing it and making it more user friendly, so that they can access it easier, and becomes more comfortable for them, and differentiating our service from the rest of the services that are available in the market. Those are the things that we have gone into, so it's better to keep scanning and seeing, what are the possibilities that can be there in terms of disruption, and can we disrupt ourselves, rather than waiting
Right.
for someone else to disrupt us, and that is something which we keep doing, and experimenting on the side, like launching of the DIY products as well, which can come into play. DIY is not a very strong segment as of now in India, but we thought we will occupy this position as well, and learn from the launch that we have done already, and what are
Right.
the possibilities that can open up at a later date.
So one aspect about the pandemic, Nivan, that we cannot repeat enough is the adoption of technology. Right now, when you look at the new normal and you look at technology in education, especially, there's a lot of technology being used. So, to you, what are the technologies that you're going to adopt in future? To future-proof your business, make it more agile, and also reach out to your stakeholders easier.
We already launched the online learning platform,
Yes.
an edtech digital platform, which was actually pre-planned, but it worked out as a good timing for us to help us cater to the growing and booming sector of edtech, which is now worth probably over 2.5 billion. Just in the last year, I think edtech companies raised around around 2 billion, 1.5 to 2 billion, and this was just in India, right? So it's a hugely growing and booming sector, not just in terms of revenue, but also in terms of users with the access to internet and all going up, and the connectivity going up. So one, A, as like a business and a venture, this worked out well for us. But two, also to cater to the needs of the parents, who not just because of COVID, but also tuitions and paying for different subjects with different tuition teachers year on year is becoming a little expensive and taxing for the parents also. So having an online learning handy tool which gives you all the subjects at one go and where you can actually monitor the progress of your child made a lot of sense. So one was this platform that we launched, which helped us a great deal. And actually, the good part is now it's creating a good sync between our offline and online businesses, because even so for our over 130 schools in India, what we're going to do is what we are already doing is that we are making all the assessments, the analytics of the students' progress, the report cards, and lot of so these days students learning isn't just completed by school learning through textbooks and all. You need a lot of visual learning for the visual learners and the audio learners. So all the visual learning aspects of them and all the audio learning aspects of them, we do all of these via the app Birla Brainia.
Viren, if you would definitely have noticed the number of startups that have popped up in the healthcare arena, right? There's like from delivering the chemist shop online to the doctors and consultations online apps, and there are business models that have evolved around delivering healthcare digitally. So for you also, this is new competition that wasn't there when Dr. Devi Shetty would have started the business. Right. So this is something completely new, and I mean, it's not completely new in the sense that it happened yesterday, but it's evolving, and you are also now in that game because you'll have to be better than them, right? So, and some of the things that Shailesh spoke about in terms of technology adoption and all. So, tell us a little bit more about, I know you have already told us a little bit about how technology is helping you, but could you just elaborate a little bit on how technology is making your business more productive, and how you can take on the challenge from the startups? Is technology really among your top 3 priorities when you come to office on a Monday?
to answer the last question first, I mean, technology is the number one priority.
Okay.
3.5 years back, we took quite a large decision driven by my solid conviction that we can't leave the building of technology to the technologists. I mean, all respect for Shailesh and the companies built, and I think IBM does tremendous work and has been. You never go wrong with hiring IBM. But if you build that culture of dependence on vendors, you lack your ability to understand your own business well enough to explain it to the vendor in a proper way. And so when two people are not speaking the same language, ultimately leads to a suboptimal solution. And that's what generally happens in the non-success stories of IT. And we thought this is something we know better than anyone else. We don't know technology, but realistically speaking, this is something I cribbed from an ad. It says in the information economy, every business is in the technology business.
Okay.
It is just a means of delivering. So honestly, we could have chosen to run our hospital without a finance department, because finance is not our core competence either. We could have outsourced that to someone else and said, yeah, you manage the finance. We could have decided to run it without a supply chain or a purchasing department. But we realized that, okay, there are specialized aspects of finance that are relevant. There's specialized aspects of supply chain that are relevant. Okay, so we added those features that we didn't see ourselves doing. In technology was that as well. For us, it was just this huge enabler. We thought we have to build competencies in that. Fortunately, or mostly unfortunately, this pandemic has proved us right in that having made such a large investment in a technology team and building our own tech, it is now paying dividends. So yes, I mean, it's 100% the most important thing, because it is a forcing function for us to relook at our legacy processes and a way that things can be improved, not by, moving from one set of forms to another color of form, but moving, and not just even moving the form from paper to digital. When you put technology, you're questioning why the form should even be there.
Absolutely.
When you can pull the data directly from someone's Aadhaar card, or you can take it from the past data. That's essentially what it does. And so the technology is just the excuse, honestly, that I use to get people more excited about doing this business transformation. Now to the other question you asked about, the startups and the way we implement. See, they do operate in a much different space. They're much more consumer focused. They are dealing with interaction that happen outside of the hospital, and it is very valuable. This is something people are asking for. Now, no one is going to, put up a form and put an official query and say, I would like to buy medicines at home. It doesn't work that way. What happens is enthusiastic startups come, they identify a problem, they try it out. Maybe they try it 20 years ago and it doesn't work. And then you realize, okay, the market has not voted for it. They do it 10 years ago, it struggles for a bit and then it succeeds. And then you realize, okay, this is what the market has told. This is what they want. They're voting for it with their wallet. And so that's a signal for us to say, okay, fine. This many people want it. We should offer that as well. And so we do, but not to the same scale that they offer it, obviously, because we, for us, what's most important is the patients we take care of. And so we want to enable e-transactions and digital pharmacy for our patients and do it in a more limited way. So we won't compete necessarily. It's just about taking the best parts of what they do and applying that to our business. There's another startup that has, they've done very interesting things with identifying patients all over the country with very aggressive marketing techniques and saying you can get this surgery done at some no-name hospital, but I'll take care of everything for you. I'll pick you up, I'll drop you in the hospital. I've, done some sort of background check on the doctor. He's a good doctor. The price is reasonable. I'll deal with the insurance company. And that's brilliant. And they're doing very well. Now, there are certain business practices that they conduct that are quite egregious, but there are other things that there's a lot to be admired. And so for us, it's a question of fine, taking the elements of what startups like these do and seeing that, okay, it turns out that patients really find it difficult coming to the hospital. So we want to start offering pick up and drop facility. Or some patients really find it irritating dealing with insurance companies. So let's take some of that burden for ourselves.
Can say that again.
So essentially, that's how we think about, the entire startup scene. There are very valuable lessons for large companies to pick up from. We can't do exactly what they do and we cannot become them. We can try, we will fail because legacy businesses, companies that have been around a long time, just have a very different way of operating. We're not nimble, we're not agile. Things need to go through, a certain layer, but that means it's built something more robust. Whereas they're like a tiny boat that can very quickly turn. Take a full 90-degree turn for oil tanker, it will just collapse into the ocean.
Correct.
So the aspects that the way they conduct their business, there are elements we can emulate because that's what customers are voting for. So for us, it's a very good source of idea generation and things that, and few of them that we can work with, 100% we work with. But of course, startups do have the same kind of world domination mentality that larger businesses do. And so sometimes these relationships tend to only go up to a natural limit. And then you realize we are not quite compatible.
Sailesh, to you also, it must be music to the ears, even though not just as a technology vendor, but as a technologist, right? As a person who espouses technology and the adoption of technology in organizations. So Viren is talking about giving precedence to robustness over agility. While you have to be agile, of course, but not at the cost of building something that is robust and strong and in sync with what the business objectives are. He also spoke about customers, right? And how you were talking about customers. So maybe Shailesh, you could now tell us a little bit about, core businesses, like you said, right? Core businesses like Viren's, like Education Nirvans, and like a steel company and others. How can technology help them serve their customers better? There's a lot of talk about customer experience, and in retail we talk about omni-channel strategy and have the same dashboard across different touch points. But how can core businesses serve their customers better using technology?
See, first, as I said, the consumer behavior has changed significantly and I won't say last several years, I've seen last couple of years, and that's because of the social media and the voice that the client has got into it.
Right.
Now we have all grown up learning the 4 Ps of marketing, right? Price, promotion, placement, product, right? Many of the companies have made their product, their competitive advantage based on the product superiority or the price competitiveness and all, and they are not going to be sufficient in today's world of consumer behavior because the new battleground is customer experience. Okay, and customer experience, I'm telling you, is becoming pretty much more important than the product and the pricing itself, because people are putting premium on the experience that they have delivering these services. It will be very true of healthcare, but it will be true of paints, education, in every industry. Having the customer engagement to be able to provide a superior customer experience, and that is where technology can play a big role. For the simple reason that in today's environment, your window to respond to customer experience, take corrective actions, act on the feedback, launch more products or more promotions, all those are not something that you have too much time. It is not a matter of weeks or months as earlier it was. It is, in some of the industries, matter of minutes and hours, like telecom industry or banking industry. You need to take action a minute and hours, or at the most days, right? So that is where the technology plays a big role in making an engagement system, and it is an investment. It is an investment that companies are now realizing that they have to make, and it has returns on that investment simply because you have a better customer experience, you have customer loyalty, right? And loyalty, we all know, acquiring a new customer versus cost of having a loyal customer, those are advantages of them. We also know that customers who have better experience are ready to pay a higher price for the same products, right? So there is a very tangible return on investment, but it requires an investment to have a client engagement system, and that's where the technology comes in. The starting point is, and Viren referred to it, is mapping the customer journey and identifying those touch points where the customer touches the organization, and have a system to be able to capture the feedback, okay, and mechanism to be able to act on that feedback. I mean, with whatever agility, but once you have the feedback, you know what is the expiry date of that feedback. Some of the expiry dates are sometimes in seconds, but the ability to take the feedback at all the touch points and be able to act on it and continuously improve your customer experience, that is something that most of the traditional core organizations need to focus on. Obviously, some of the startups do it very well, and as Vin said, they have the luxury of much more agility, both because of the size and the state of the organization. But that is something that technology can enable for even the larger organization. NPS, the Net Promoter Score, which has now become pretty much a measure of customer experience across the industries, is something that I guess the adoption is happening, and companies need to more sincerely, not seriously, but more sincerely adopt it and act on it. But this is definitely the new battleground in client success.
Thank you so much. In fact, we have just about run out of time by about 5 minutes or so. So, it's been a very, very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us in this discussion. And we hope that our audience will take away a lot of thoughts. We had discussions around how technology can help customer retention as well as acquisition, about how you need to focus more on the robustness of your technology platforms and then focus on agility. COVID has taught us a lot of things. They've made us go digital, made us more efficient, more productive. Business models are evolving for traditional businesses. And I'm sure that with leaders like yourself in these companies, the legacy is going to get only stronger. Thank you so very much.